Hey guys, welcome back to episode 7 of Project Tokyo. Today in this episode I'm going to be sitting down with my coach Ben Thompson. We go through a lot of things with my program, how things are leading into Tokyo, how we reprogrammed for my injury, and just a lot of different things that really make my training what it is and the way that we prepare and get ready for major championships. And we go quite in depth, and we even showed my programming, how that is running right now, and even some examples through my iPad up on the screen. So guys, hope you enjoy this episode. Can't wait for the next one. Please send me some comments and let me know what you want to see more of. I really had fun actually doing this one. This was quite interesting to just see Benny's perspective on how my training's going and how things have transpired over our time together as coach and athlete. So hope you enjoy the episode. Let's get into it. Guys, welcome to episode 7 of Project Tokyo. Today, I have my coach, Benjamin Thompson, the madman himself, the mad scientist. Welcome, Benny.
Pleasure to be here, man.
Oh, geez, that sounds lovely and deep there.
Get out of it.
Yeah. Guys, so on this episode, we're just going to be chatting with Benny, because obviously he's the man behind the madness and all the programming and everything that goes into my training and what makes me through PBs and far as hell all the time. At least for last week. And I want to start with asking Benny, because obviously you guys know my opinion on how my training is going, but Benny might be different. Who knows? Benny, how's my training going from your perspective?
At the moment, very good.
Okay.
Consistent.
I like hearing that.
Yeah. No, it's from my perspective, when you see consistency in training, when you're rocking up day in, day out, you're not missing any sessions, you're lifting well, you're able to execute on our key points, whether that's in training or in throws. You string together a few weeks like that or a few months, and then you're in seriously good shape before you know it.
What can I say? Just amazing, huh? Oh, God. All right, microphone's on. I've got to make sure this is recording, otherwise that we're not going to get any content on the programming.
Yeah, don't do that.
That'd be annoying, because we just did a podcast for 50 minutes and lost all of that. So it'd be annoying to not have all of this as well. So anyway, there is said program for the last X amount of time. But when we started together 2017.
Correct. 2017.
So just before Com Games, I moved up to Brisbane end of 2017 and put a big team around me with QAS and all that kind of stuff. But when we started focusing on the beginning, when we started you started programming and basically taking over my everything. What was your initial thoughts on things to build on? What were my big traits that you found that were holding me back to getting to where we are now at 66 consistently kind of area, and then peaking into something bigger hopefully.
I think it's important to note that you'd already been around there. You'd thrown 65 and Triton.
Yes, 65 in America before. That was 2016 for Olympics, and then but 2017 I started with 61, 63 in the season, but by the end of the season I was just in terrible form, so I think I went down to 53. 55 actually. So we had an amazing starting point.
So when I spoke to you, you were in 55. 56.
Red hot form.
Okay, so from an initial standpoint, it was problem solving.
Yeah,
figure out what was going on, and just subjectively speaking, the dosage that you're under in terms of training volume was too high. It was just killing you.
To give an example, guys, nothing against pity, but I was kind of at the point in my career where I was more needing fine-tuned stuff, and we were still doing very heavy loaded weeks, where I think one of the highest weeks that I did at the start of that year was 63 ton in a period of a 3-day gym week. And it worked very well, because when I was young, I was very reactive and I was very good at recovering from those. So I had really good spikes in training. But then I think I just kind of got to my limit on that, and I needed a little bit more structure in my training and life and all that because of, basically I was moving to Brisbane because of Mia, and I wanted to obviously live with Mia, but also like I needed to change my training environment with going to QAS and having that around me. So that's kind of some context for that. But yeah.
And that adaptation window that you have too, that's not an infinite resource.
No.
It's finite.
I used it to its absolute limit.
Yeah, so it's you need the appropriate fitness, as in like ability to do a task to be able to tolerate that kind of loading. If it creeps up too quickly, then you're gonna get into some trouble. So when we first came on board, it was a reduction in loading. If you remember correctly, I actually gave you quite a lot of time off.
Yeah, I felt like I was doing nothing.
And then when we started back, it was we established what your RMs were. So we just went down the traditional road and we established percentage RM for your lifts just to figure out what you could do versus what we think you could do. And we figured out that you were like 30% off wherever you thought you were. You still had the ability, like the raw horsepower, to lift big numbers. But in terms of being able to develop a base and just get medium velocity lifts in at routine volume, you had no fitness there. So once we established percentage RM work with you and proceeded through that,
it was just basically getting me back to a point.
It was
where
relatively
I was
straightforward,
feeling fresh,
and it was established too that was probably going to be a new process for you.
Yeah,
so
it was a big change.
Anything new will work. So it was a luxury at the beginning. Go, yeah, sweet, we can do this. We're going to get a great response out of it, and we did.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't show it at commies, but like I fouled a 66. So like in about 7 months, I went from 55 to 66, and then hammer, I was like it was very frustrating because I didn't throw what I wanted to at Com Games in a whole respect because, I was warming up with like 78s in hammer easily. And then I also was like at 66 with that foul and kind of throwing that. So I obviously had that peak end power, but like, whereas now, like I have that kind of more consistent power and still having the leverage to potentially get that bigger stuff. But yeah, no, I do remember that because I felt like I was doing absolutely sweet FA, but
it's what you needed. We needed to just back off for a little bit before we could establish where you needed to be.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And so if we go to now, so like where we are now, and obviously I hurt myself in end of October, start of November. That was big for us because I hadn't been injured properly since like 2014, 2013. And you weren't even there for that point in time. So this is like our first big injury to deal with. What was the biggest effects that you found that the injury had? How did that affect your programming for me, and like the way that we addressed trying to manage that, but also get into basically to where we are now and like repositioning ourselves from, COVID, just before when COVID took off, we were in PB form, we were ready to go. COVID hit, wasted our form, got back end of October, November, PB form, better than what we did at the start of the year, injured again, wasted that form. And now we had to rebuild again. And now like we wasted the whole domestic season. And now we're like only just being able to get back to that form again. I feel that you smashed it in the fact that like we like got back to where we needed to be very consistently after setbacks. But like what was after this injury, the biggest change that you found? Well,
that in particular, that injury was a rib cartilage injury to start with. It was what we were advised it was anyway. It wasn't acute enough to go, it's like, oh man, you've been hit by a truck. It was more like you'd report discomfort in training. You're like, oh, I'm feeling this underneath my like slightly lateral oblique. Yeah. And we're like, oh, okay, it's something that let's rely on. Let's go to the medical side of things. Let's get some feedback. So this injury in particular, it was drawn out for a long time. So the gift of hindsight is always great, but during that process it was impossibly frustrating because we weren't able to execute at the higher levels what we could do. So you had lower level ability to execute tasks, which wasn't an issue. There were oddities while you were still injured when we couldn't back squat, but we could trap bar deadlift. Yep. So there was a subtle change in the posterior loading aspect between those two exercises that allowed us to execute. So, okay, that's strange. Why can't we do that?
Yeah.
But specifically talking, we weren't allowed to rotate. So you you couldn't do your event.
Yeah.
And we couldn't do anything that could potentially improve your event.
Yeah, so even I remember even trap bars, I was still getting like loaded up through obliques and rib and stuff, and then like sumos didn't work. It was kind of like, well, what can I do?
Yeah. So prior to injury, you're in red hot form. We're around 23.7, 23.8 meters a second in training using our TrackMan respectively. So our numbers will be different to what other people will get just based on how we set that up. But for us, that was a good indicator. And you're throwing 6480s in training, on the money every time. I was like, okay, which is phenomenal.
Yeah, which was good considering. Yeah.
So to have that happen in November, it's a process. You need to be able to think quick on your feet because it's not always, those things don't happen in ideal times. There's no such thing as an ideal time. So you have to be able to program swiftly, which sometimes means, so we have a program here, which is, it's not law. It's just a guide to get us through. So it was more like constant review. So,
and I mean, and you can even look in the, like I'll have that obviously up on the screen right now, but even through the programming, it even has like very finite details of like where the injury was, like when the injury was and like kind of how you adjusted for that.
I didn't go too crazy with all the detail in here. I mean, it happened in late October, early November, as we said, but then that process went through October, November, December, into January where we still had modified training. And then it wasn't really until February where you can start to see that. And if we go into different sections where we track your throws load and your throws tracking, then you can see the initial portions of this, assuming this would be on the screen.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Then over here on the left-hand side, we've got distances like 59, 57, 58, 59, and that's when you're pretty much capped at training.
Yep.
So we had moderate throws load, but that's about the distance you threw. That's about what you were capable of. And it wasn't until, there's a number here, 6230, which was, excuse me for a second, 8th of March.
Yeah. Took a while.
That was really when the indicators were there to say like you're out of this now.
Yeah, it was weird. I went away for a weekend in Noosa and had a few drinks and went for a 10K walk, which I thought would probably not help the fact. And then I woke up the next morning and I felt absolutely fine. It's like it never even happened.
Stay in a nice house, reevaluate life, get on the sauce, and then come back and you're like, no, I'm good to go. Let me at it.
So simple. Let's get back into high performance.
Yeah. So that was...
Oh, there we go. Yep. And then there. Yep.
Yeah. So what we had to do was we had to stay on our feet in terms of what we wrote. So what you'll see on the screen isn't necessarily what we did to 100% detail. We didn't stick to that, nor do we to the extent that it would be to the detriment of where he currently sits. So it's just a guide.
That probably leads me into my my next point. So like I definitely noticed when we started working together, and then it's even got even more the more like we've trained together and worked together and done all the programming, that it's very, very detailed. Like there's not many, especially in Australia, not many coaches or S&Cs or anything that go so in depth into the programming, the way that it's structured. And we won't have this on the screen because like we don't have it and there's no real point in sharing it, but like we have strength profiles and a lot of different other things that we have tracked. You've got that many different like files that are recording over the period since 2017. Why so detailed? Why so finite?
If you don't have any recordings or measurements of where you've been, you're just going to guess where you're going to.
Yep.
So hindsight's good because you can establish what worked, what didn't. You can eliminate, because the human body is different in that sense. What would work for you may not work for one of your fellow athletes, one of your other competitors. So I could throw the exact same program at them and then it would actually make them worse. It's just that the system that we have established is based around science, but it's also just refined to how you moved and how you've improved.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because I think that especially like with the way that my life changed in 2017, that like I needed that structure and understanding where the road was, where I sat, and then how that kind of like, it was definitely a change when, with Pity and I, we still did monthly programming. But sometimes it was week to week. And yet again, like this isn't talking about that one way or the other is bad, but like my life just shifted and I needed that change of programming to like suit my lifestyle. So I definitely know that for me, it really, really helps being able to see process, outcome and tracking and like being able to see where that goes. Cause it's like good for the mind, but also good to like actually have that for past when you can basically refer to, things that you might need to change in future and what worked, what didn't, and like having that tracking.
Yeah. I just looked at, what we did in Doha 2019.
Yeah.
And when you came back from Europe, you threw in the London Diamond League, you threw 63.
38.
There you go, 63.38. And you came back and you're pretty tuckered. So we reloaded for about 5 weeks, which I calculated.
I was cooked after that 5 weeks.
Uh-huh.
I threw 58 before we left.
You did.
And I was very concerned.
You did. But we
2
calculated.
weeks later, I threw like 66 and a half in training. I was like, okay. All right,
Yeah,
cool.
which we'd calculated. So in comm games, it took you 2 weeks to freshen up.
Yeah.
Based on how you're recovering and how you're progressing, it's like Doha was going to be somewhere between 3 to 5 weeks, and I banked on more 5 weeks side, particularly with how we had loaded you.
Yep.
So we threw overweight tools, we lifted heavy things, we moved heavy things fast with intent. So everything was geared towards around power.
Yeah.
Which takes its toll on you. So
Tokyo, what do you think freshen up time frame is?
3 weeks.
3?
Yeah, we won't load you as heavy for Tokyo. We won't go that deep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good for me. I don't feel terrible all the time then. Okay, cool. No, that's good. Now, obviously went to the detailed side, but also like when you're programming, because I know like you obviously have a lot of different athletes. Benny's predominantly a javelin coach, so I'm his first discus thrower. He's done very well. But with the programming, like what are your key focuses? Like do you have because I know you did a lot of mentoring with a lot of different people, and Dirk Spitz being one. He's one of the head performance guys at the Lions. You know, what did you learn from Spitzy? What did you learn from the other guys? Like, is there like a key philosophy on specific things? Do you have a checklist that you go through that you like want to focus on? Or like, you know, before you send it to me, do you have certain things that you need, like key parameters?
Yeah. So Spitzy is a good mate and he's also a mentor. So what have I learned from him? I don't know enough. Never know enough.
Okay.
So
I definitely noticed that with you. You're always very persistent on learning new things.
A little bit OCD with consumption of knowledge.
Yeah, we're on the same page there. That's right.
Yeah. So in terms of checklist of what have I go through with you, actually pause that. Can you read the question back to me again, Matty, please?
Yeah. So, like, what are your key focuses when programming? So, like, do you have a checklist on like things that you need to cover?
Okay. Yeah. It depends on the phase and where we're at and what we determine is going to be the best quality for you.
Yep.
So initially it was establishing that you needed to be within a certain percentage of normative data of what these guys can lift, and these guys references the people you compete against.
Yep.
So as just a very general brush to paint, you know, like most of these guys would back squat full range 250, 260 kilos. If they're doing quarter squats, it's 300 plus.
Yep.
Bench is always somewhere around 200 kilos. Then they have power clean numbers, they have snatch numbers, and we know all this data, and we had established that you were within, you know, X% of that. But in the initial phases, is like you generally had a 27% to 20% deficit. So we closed the gap.
Yep.
Now it's not as important. So it changes slightly where you are strong enough through a majority of your lifts. So what takes priority is different. It's how quickly you can produce force. So we look at it in a sense of, it's called time under the curve. So if we give you a maximal lift with infinite time, you can produce a huge amount of force, but it's incredibly slow. Your event, once you have both feet in contact with the ground, your double support to release is around 0.22, 0.21.
Yep.
So that's the amount of time you have to produce force. So we look at movements where you need to be better in under 0.2 of a second or under 0.3 of a second.
Yep.
So we establish power profiles based on that, so we can figure out where you are, where you're at, which is what we've done recently. We've been using the GymAware system. Hey, GymAware, please give us some.
Please give us some more stuff.
Yeah, we would love to use some more of your equipment. It's the gold standard. Thank you.
Yeah.
But to
why is that? Why are they gold standard? I know why, but like, if you explain to the viewers why. Tracking total system load and all that sort of stuff.
In simple terms, I prefer a mechanical tether versus an optical system to establish a load.
Yeah.
It's like if I'm gonna use a system to do that, plus the portability factor of it is incredible. I could have it in a room with us now, and we could take it to the gym. We could figure out where you're at.
Yeah.
So, honestly, it's as simple as that. They have an optical system, which is good, but I just a little bit more old school, prefer the mechanical tether.
Yep.
That, and because we have historical data using GymAware,
you can track it like optimal wattage output.
Yeah, so I'm comparing apples with apples, so to speak. So the 2017 data we have is with the GymAware system, and we can compare where you are currently to that.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Anyway, continue. I just wanted to clarify on that, why that was gold standard.
So in terms of checkpoints, that's roughly where we're at. So 2017, we used that system. So we just established that you needed to be generally stronger. Now you need to be generally more powerful because you have the biomotor abilities that are there. We can probably improve some lifts, but the question you've got to ask yourself is making your back squat more or box squat more going to make you throw further? The answer is probably no, because your box squat's going to be around 345 to 347 kilos, moves not slow.
Yeah.
And that's enough to throw far. So we delve into more athletic qualities. So foot timing, temporal data, how quickly you get from the left to the left is going to be more important.
Yep.
And then utilizations of your body sling. So your mobility becomes paramount, but it's especially important to note that Matt is hypermobile, is very elastic. So it's a gift.
In certain times.
Yeah, it's a
Not
gift.
when you have a jammed ankle currently.
Not when you have a jammed ankle. But so that's basically where we're getting to. So currently Matt needs to produce more power in under 0.2 of a second. But in relation to that, we're using that example specifically. So we're throwing tools, we're throwing equipment. So there should theoretically be more transfer to training performance, which is ultimately what we want. We don't want to be wasting our time doing fruitless exercises that we think will transfer. So
100%. I definitely noticed that. Like our training's got simpler over the time, but the performance has still continued on an up curve, other than like the injury point in times. But other than that, like still getting a response, still being like adaptable in that, even though like the older I get, I obviously lose my ability for that lesson. So
it does.
Yeah.
Diminishing returns.
Yeah, 100%.
So we're not quite in the thick of it yet.
Yeah, no, wait till I'm like 29, 30. Then we're going to start getting real creative. Tips for athletes and coaches. Let's go with 3. Let's try and keep it a little bit more succinct in what, from whether it's S&C or whether it's coaching in general and just producing like high level performance and like that kind of side of the sport. What are your like main things that you would probably want to, mentor someone with?
Okay. I'd probably start that process with the same way I started with you. So you need to establish where you are. If you don't know where you are, then you're in serious trouble. So that to unpack that statement a bit, you need to have a battery of tests that you're going to use, and they could be individual to the athlete, and they could be standardized tests to figure out where you're at.
Yep.
And then once you have that data, then you need to decide what you're going to do with it. So theoretically speaking, if we had a young athlete that was, say, 6'3", 6'4", and 90 kilos, and they had physical performance data around, maybe I can back squat 190 kilos. Maybe I can bench 110. I'm trying to do my best for like the average kind of good discus thrower here. You got to establish that that person, that boy or girl, needs to get significantly stronger to start with. But it needs to be in line with the technical model. So it can't be a sacrifice of one over the other. It has to be balanced between the two. So checkpoint 1 is, again, it's establish, know where you are. Number 2, once you've established where you are at, then it's actioning on that data. So that data should suggest to you that you're going to need A, B, C, or D. So it's going to be, I need to get stronger, I need to get more rangy, I need to be more powerful.
Or it gives you a pathway to follow through with.
Yeah, it gives you an avenue to follow.
Yeah.
So once you have that, you need to establish how you're going to tackle that.
Yep.
And the one thing becomes priority. Priority means one, so you focus on that wholly and solely.
Yep.
But the caveat is the other things keep ticking along at the same time. So it's like that's the focus, and you and the athlete need to be very clear on that. That's what you're doing, and it will mean a range of things will happen to the athlete during that time. They might expect to get better, but you might be focusing on a quality that is not necessarily going to translate immediately to the improvement of the throw. It's a process.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
So know where you are, know what you're going to action on, and then once you're there, I'm going to steal this. No, it's not a steal. I'm going to pass on the.
It's a borrow.
It's a borrow. It's a sharing of wisdom from Dale Stevenson. It's like you need a highly accountable team.
Yeah.
And that's more pointed than ever.
Yeah.
So it's as much as it's you and me. We've got a really good team behind us now.
I think it's like 8 or 9 other people.
8 or 9 other people.
Yeah.
But in the initial phases, it's you and me. So the team starts with 2.
Yep.
Normally, or it might be mum and dad, and as well as coach and athlete.
It's just like, it starts with that like immediate support crew that like initiate the journey.
Yep. And all it is clarity of communication with where you're going.
Yeah.
Because the coach can have 4,000 things in their head, and they don't communicate that to the athlete, and the athlete's going along the road going, I'm doing everything you're telling me to. I'm not sure why I'm doing this. What's going on?
Yeah.
And then it's just a very clear, it's like communication pathway of like how we're going, so that the team needs to be highly accountable. They need to work quickly.
Yep.
Which is a key thing, because the window for this sport is, the performance window is 10 to 12 years, probably, depending. If you identify someone at 18 as being really talented,
sounds long, but it's not.
They should be in their prime come 28. They should be able to hold that from 28 to 31, statistically speaking. And then from 31 onwards, the chances of medals decreases significantly, but it's still possible.
It is maintainable.
There's outliers in there, but that's generally it. And
be proactive, not reactive.
Yeah. So when you realize that you only have a set amount of years to develop a physical ability, let's say that's 4 years to get within the ballpark of that. So you've gone from 18 to 22, and you're like, I'm going to start competing. You're still a baby. You still have to develop the physical quality needed. So there's probably going to be somewhere between another, on top of that 4 years, there's probably going to be another 2 to 3 years on top of that.
Yeah. Okay.
To get within the ballpark. So if you don't know where you're going, you don't know the pathway you're on, and you're not accountable or actionable on it,
you haven't got the process that you need.
No,
agreed.
No. You might have the willpower, but you don't have the process.
That's what I mean. Like I've said, I sound like a record at the moment, but especially from my point of view, like being an athlete, you're just a reincarnation of the information that's provided to you. But you also need to be able to be actionable on how you get that information, making sure it's correct, and structuring it so that it is efficient. Otherwise, that if you have those broken kinks, then you're not going to be able to efficiently roll through it.
That's the positive feedback loop side of things. I feed something to you, it improves you. You relay that we can probably tweak 1 or 2 things from that, which encourages
That's what I mean, like the discussion between it as well,
and then goes. So
okay, yeah, good. All right, well that's easily covered. I think to end this episode probably on a lighter note, what do I do really well? And what do I do?
Too long in training.
And what do I do really bad? Let's start with negatives, and we'll end with positives to get a good vibe.
No, Matthew thoroughly enjoys spending time in the gym, a little bit too much so. So speeding him up, expediting the process would be.
I love to catch up with friends. Get off my back.
Yes.
Is that only it? Is that it?
Look, that's honestly the main one. So it's like
nice. That's a win in my book. That's a win in my book.
Time conscious would be nice.
Okay, cool. Time conscious. What do I do really well? 3 things. I know that you could go forever. but let's just go with 3.
You have laser-like focus when you
Nice.
train, which also leads into number 2. So your attention is on point.
Okay.
Which is most people is not. It's like attention is something that's just like as a luxury they get given fleetingly. It's like your intention is like I'm going to throw 68, and then everything is geared underneath that.
Yeah.
So everything you do behavior wise is linked with that. So it's like that's a massive strength. And then number 3 is got nothing to do with your ability, but it's your gifts.
Yeah.
It's like you're big, you've got long arms, you're blessed with what I would presume is a large amount of type 2X, type 2A fibers.
Yep.
So you have the prerequisites to throw far,
Yep.
which is genetic.
Yep.
So among those 3 things, 2 you are responsible for, and 1
Thanks, Mum and Dad. Legends.
1 you are proving you are worthy of.
Okay, sweet. Last one. What excites you most about Tokyo? What's making you like, let's go?
That I genuinely believe that we can upset the fold up the top.
Response that I wanted. Mate, I'm going to walk into this comp today with an absolute ego that I can't fit through the door to get to.
Just settle down, mate.
All right. No, that's very good. Dude, thanks for coming on the series today. I'll definitely get you back on again soon, and then definitely into the future when we do more of this, because I think that your information that you provide is very high quality and like in depth, and like people understand it. It's not like you just talking gibberish, like you explain it very well. So I hope everyone enjoyed the episode today. Thank you, Benny, for coming on, and let's go throw some discuses in, what's the time?
4 hours.
4 hours. All right. I'm going to go have a swim and maybe even a nap.